Thanks for inviting me to today's session. I'm going to stop the video now so that you can really focus on the topic. Today's topic it's about data governance and why and how to govern your data estate with Azure Purview, that new thing, that new kid on the block that was introduced last December. And sometimes, we are looking for data. Data is everywhere. And the session could also be named like, oh my God, there's data everywhere. And I would like to give you some ways of how to get an overview about your data estate in your company, about your data lakes, your databases, your Power BI things, your SAPs in your company, and how Azure Purview maybe, and I think, let's skip the maybe, how Azure Purview can help you. And if we are looking around, there's data everywhere. Every door you open or every server you connect to in your company, there's data. There's data behind the green door, there's data behind the blue door, there's data everywhere. And sometimes, it's not that easy to find the right data and to look for the right data at the right place. And sometimes it's not easy because data is separated in data islands, we sometimes call them. There's a data island for SAP, there's a data island for our CRM system, there's a data island for some other systems. And those islands, they are separated. And what we really need to get a complete overview about our data estates, we need to bridge those data islands. And sometimes those bridges are available and possible, like that one, good bridges, because we can bridge the product data out of SAP with the product information from the web shop. But sometimes those bridges, they are a little bit not that kind of solid. Sometimes it's not that easy to even know if there is some data stored on the other island. And sometimes it's not easy to bridge that information because some unknown system is involved to share and transport data from one data island or system to the other. And then it's our turn to get on the journey, to search the data, to look for the data. Where is my customer data stored? Where do I get my customer data from and where is it put to? And what would be really handy wouldn't be a map of our data islands. Wouldn't that be nice to have some sort of map, a data map? And with that, it would make the view about our data a little bit better. And that's the thing I would like to talk about in the next few minutes. It's Azure Purview. How Azure Purview can help you to govern, to collect, and to map your data estate, and how Azure Purview supports your data infrastructure in a good way. So sometimes we know that we have data, but the data isn't sorted. The data is just there, and we need to bring some sort of ordering in there. And what really helps is some sort of index. What really helps is some sort of catalog in order to find Russian for dummies or French, the dictionary, and so on. So what really needs to be there, and that is one of the main things I will talk today about, it's a data catalog. A software that you can use to inventory your data estate, search within the data catalog, and somehow classify the information. For example, that we have some dictionaries, that we have some fiction books, non-fiction books, and so on and so forth. So that is the story of how and why to govern your data estate with Azure Purview. Before we start, I'm gonna skip that slide. My name is Wolfgang. I'm here to talk about data, Azure Purview today. I'm from Austria. I work and live in Austria, and I like to work with data. So let's start. What is Azure Purview? Azure Purview, Microsoft defines it as a unified data governance service, which is there to map our data. And to map our data estates, the different systems that are there in our company, across hybrid sources. So Azure Purview, it's not limited to Azure data storage and the Azure data platform. It also allows us to catalog hybrid on-premises data sources like SQL Server, like Oracle, like SAP, and so on and so forth. So one part of the story is to map your data. The other part is to discover trusted data. So there are some sort of scanners that you can point to a database, that you can point to a data storage, that you can point to whatever system, and that does some sort of inventory mechanism to discover data. And without that information, or starting with that information, well, what you get and what Purview gives you is some sort of classification. For example, well, in that database table, there is email address data stored, or person related data like GDPR data that needs to be classified and be marked as sensitive and so on. So classification is also a huge part of the data catalog, because you need to know where your sensitive data or your customer data or your product data is stored in your data environment. And data doesn't just live on one place. Data goes from one place to the other. There are data transformation, integration processes running. And what you really need to know to really understand your data is to understand the data supply chain. So data lineage is a thing. Where does my data come from? What are the transformations in there? And where does my data go to? And last but not least, well, business. The business needs to understand, and the business needs to be able to work with the data catalog. So business context is key. It's not only the technical thing that we have some sort of column that is called email address and that contains some sort of data. It's the more global definition of, well, that is an entity, an asset that contains customer data. That is an asset that contains product data and so on. So business context is really required to serve the different needs for the data catalog. It's not only the technical infrastructure, the technical inventory that is required. It's also the business context, the classification that really puts all those pieces together to have an overview and a good data catalog. So what is in there? Well, I've taken the slogan, the slide from the Microsoft site. They call it unified data governance. And what is really needed? Well, we need data sources, hybrid data sources. As I've said before, on-premises and cloud, and even multi-cloud data sources. And those systems can be operational systems and or analytical systems, like Synapse Analytics or whatever, Power BI, compared to SAP on the operational side. And those systems, they need to be scanned. They need to be connected to, and they need to be, the scanner needs to connect there. And what Purview gives us is a mechanism of automated scanning. So we will see it in the demo. We define the data sources, and we can define scan definitions. And those scan definitions, they connect to the data source. At first, they do the technical inventory. Grab the list of schemas in a database, grab the list of tables, grab the list of columns of those tables. And afterwards, next step, it's the classification. Let's have Azure Purview get a look at the data to fetch information pieces, columns in your database that contain email addresses, that contain passport numbers, that contain credit card numbers, and so on and so forth. And the output of that part, it's the data map. And here we have it. It's the inventory, the map of our data estates, the data assets. An asset in Azure Purview, it's a thing, an entity That can be a file, a folder in a data lake. That can even be a table in a database. That can also be a pipeline in Azure Data Factory, and so on. So an asset is one part of the overall knowledge graph that is built. And the data lineage between those assets is also captured and added to that knowledge network. Plus, in addition, we have those classifications. They are put on top. So we have a table, we have columns, and some of those columns, they get some sort of classification information. We will see it in the demo environment that the schema can get some classification at the column level, for example, the file level, whatever. So those are the three parts: the data assets, the lineage between those assets, plus the classification to get more information based on the assets. And then that was the unified platform. So that is the scanning, inventory, classification, the data map. And now we need to access that information. It's the unified experience. And that one is where the data catalog comes in. And the data catalog of Azure Purview is there to be searched. It's there that you can apply and manage your business glossary and apply the business glossary terms to your data assets, and to search and have a look at the data lineage. So data lineage is captured in the unified platform and can be analyzed using the unified experience, the Azure Purview Studio. And in addition, we've got the data insights. That is reporting about your data catalog, metadata reporting, like how many files, how many file types, how many scans have been there in the last week, and so on. So data about your data catalog and reporting. And that is Azure Purview, almost, because Azure Purview, it's not just one part, it's following the concept like Azure Data Factory or Synapse Analytics with the connected and linked services like Power BI can be scanned. SQL Server on premises can be scanned. Azure Synapse Analytics can be scanned, but also the other way around, like Azure Synapse Analytics can be linked to your Azure Purview catalog. I'm going to show that in a demo. So you can search Purview, your data catalog, without leaving Synapse Analytics and or Azure Data Factory. So there is some sort of outside connection and options. And it's not the end, because Azure Purview is based on Apache Atlas, the open source data governance framework. And with that approach, there is an open API. You can use the Apache Atlas API to update your data catalog, to query your data catalog, and to even feed your custom data lineage, your custom metadata from a system that doesn't have a built-in scanner as of today, using the Apache Atlas API. So very, very open to the outside, to the sources that can be screened, plus integrating into other systems, plus integrating and having the option of using an open API. That one is just a little bit getting deeper into the definition, and I think I've talked about everything about that. Well, there's one thing. Azure Purview is in preview as of today. And within that preview, you get Azure Purview or you don't get it. So you have no option of selecting the different levels that are mentioned here, like the C0 level, which is the Purview catalog, including the platform, the C1 feature or license level that contains the business glossary on top with the lineage with visualizations, and the D1 feature set would be the Azure Purview data insights. So currently in preview, it's the all-in-one set. And in the preview, you are starting your Purview journey by answering one question. How big do you want your Azure Purview instance? And it's based on so-called capacity units. So you are either starting with 4 capacity units or 16 capacity units. So that is the option you are able to select And there's another option. You have to enter a name for your Purview instance. So those are the things you can configure during the creation. And the work is done in Purview Studio. Purview Studio is the one-stop shop for everything around Purview. There is everything in there, starting with the definition of your sources, with the configuration of your scans, and so on. So Purview Studio is the thing where we are starting our Purview journey. And that is the start of the demo. In the Azure portal, I've created one Purview account in my environment. What I can also do and start is to start the creation. As I said, we need a resource group and a name. So workshop Wolfgang Purview 01, networking, and then we've got the 4 capacity units or the 16 capacity units. No option to select or deselect the managed or the different levels. So that is it. And with review and create, we could create a new Purview instance, but I've already created one. And Purview, well, there's nothing special in the Azure portal. There are role assignments, there are different levels for data curators and data source administrators. I think there are 4 roles as of today. But the real interesting stuff starts within the Purview Studio. And that's the start screen of Purview Studio. And it follows the design, maybe you know from Synapse Analytics. You've got the menu on the left and the different hubs, the data map hub, the data catalog hub, and we've got the main screen. And the main screen, we've got 4 buttons to start with. The Knowledge Center, yeah, it's a good start if you want to learn more about Purview. There are links to videos, there are links to the documentation. So Knowledge Center is a good start. Next, there is the part of the sources. And that is the part where I would like to start with. It's the list of registered data sources. And Purview supports, let's see, a list, different list of sources, different technologies that are supported. And for sure, there's Azure. For sure, there's a data lake. There is SQL, Azure SQL database. There's Cosmos DB. There are managed instances in there and so on. There is even an option to register one or multiple resource groups in Azure that can be grouped together. So you can just register one source, one Azure resource with a generic approach, and Purview in the background scans your information. Synapse Analytics is there. Databases are supported, like SQL Server, Oracle, Teradata, or Hive Metastore, which was introduced a few weeks ago. There's also an option of connecting to Power BI. So even Power BI information can be scanned and integrated in your data catalog. And last but not least, I don't really know why they call it services and apps. It's SAP in there. So define the connection to an SAP system. Let's go over here. Let's have a look at that information. So the name of the application server, system number, and a collection. And the collection, that is part of the Purview. That is part of the data map, because you can build some collections of your sources. You can group those sources. And what you see here, I've got one collection that is called Business Intelligence, a sub-collection that is data lakes in Europe, data lakes in the US. And that is a thing that you can use to group your data sources. So I've already registered some data sources in my Purview environment, like having a data lake, dedicated SQL pool, Azure resource groups, SQL databases, Azure Synapse Analytics, Power BI, and the local SQL server. That list is, well, it's nice. You get an overview, but it's not that kind of really usable. But if we switch it to the map view, it gets a little bit more interesting, because what we see here, those are the collections. we've already seen in the first configuration dialog. But now we've got some sort of, well, map where all our services, all our data sources are grouped together. And what we can do is, well, we just minimize those and we can have a look at the, okay, there's a business intelligence part, there's an Azure part, and there is a data lake and a Synapse part and some databases. And they are separated into production databases and all those databases assigned to the normal database collection. In the Synapse collection, we've got SQL databases and data lake, plus data lakes in different regions and information shared and grouped into the collection. That is a start, because the source itself, let's go to the data lake, it's just the name of the data lake, and that's it. It's not starting the inventory of your data lake. It's not starting the classification of the data in your data lake. That is just the definition of, hey, there is a data lake somewhere in your environment. In order to get the insights out of your data lake, we need to configure a new scan. And the new scan is the thing that really, well, does the work. We need to add a name, data lake for the session, and just test that one. Yes, that looks good. And in the next step, we have to scope our scan. Which parts of our data lake should be scanned? Which part of the data lakes should be searched for files? Which parts of the data lake should be included in our scan? In my part, I'm gonna use the whole data lake. So everything in my data lake. And the next question we get is a scan rule set. So what is a scan rule set? Purview talks about scan rule sets, and it combines, let's stick to the data lake. It combines the list of supported file types. So Azure Purview wants to scan CSV, wants to scan Parquet files, wants to scan whatever file types. That is one part. What are the things Azure Purview should scan? And the next thing we have to define is what should be classified in there. And there is a huge list of system-defined classification rules. There is a huge list of classification rules for defining, oh, that data piece looks like an Austrian passport number. That data piece looks like a US passport number. That piece looks like an email address. So those are classification rules. And that is also part of the scan rule set. Let's go to that one. That is a custom scan rule set. And I defined that custom scan rule set to include all those file types, plus include 34 classification rules. There are system rules. There are more than 33 rules. I think there are 300 plus. They can be or are grouped into different segments like financial ones, personal ones, security, governance, and so on. Like there is a rule for finding email addresses. There's a rule for finding ages. There is a rule for personal IP address, telephone numbers, and so on. And you can also create your custom rules. And those can be included in the scan rule set. So the scan rule set in the case of the data lake, that contains supported file systems and classification rules. For a database, it contains the classification rules. So it really depends. And there are system default classification rules for every system or Purview supported scanner. There's a classification rule or scan set rule, for data lake. There is a scan set rule for a database. There's a scan set rule for Power BI, and so on. Next, how often do you want to run your scan? In my demo environment, I'm going to stick to that once, or you define a schedule. You can run it on every first Monday in a month, or every week, every Saturday, whatever you like. But I'm going to skip to the once. There's the summary, save and run, or just save that one. So I'm not gonna run that scan. As you can see, I've already added some different scans in there, and we can have a look at the scan custom one. That one ran multiple times. We get an overview, how many assets have been found, how many assets have been discovered. And that is filling our data lake. So before we're gonna search the data lake, I'm gonna just move to the classification part, because that is really, really interesting when Purview connects to your data source. And as a second step, it just runs the data classification. It's defined in the documentation, how many rows, how many megabytes or gigabytes of each file they read and how they classify it. But the system wants, it's a huge list, like Canada passport number, credit card number, Cyprus identity card. So many, many system defined ones. And custom ones, yeah, there are many, not that many. There are two of them that have been defined from myself. One is the Postleitzahl Austria, which is the zip code. And the other one is DBCC Kunde, which searches the data for customer numbers. And in our case, a customer number starts with KU, which is Kunde, customer in German. And then we have 4 digits. The classification itself, it's just the, we get the certification. There is some customer data in there. The classification rules, those are the working things. Those are the rules that really match the data. And if they match, the classifications get applied. So let's have a look at the DBCC Kunde classification rule. Let's go over here. And that one is applying the classification of DBCC Kunde. So that is the information that is applied. And it's of type regular expression. And if you hear regular expression, and I'm a business intelligence developer, and I started many, many years ago with software engineering, well, regular expressions, well, they are there. You can use them if you know how to use them. And there's the option of uploading a sample file, and Purview suggests you some regular expressions. But in our case, there is one data pattern applied. Customer numbers have to start with capital K and U. Then we've got 4 digits, and that's it. And if data is matched to that pattern, more than 60% out of the first data sample we got, and that one is, if that one applies, the classification of DBCC Kunde is applied. You can even apply a column pattern. So if you are searching within a database or Purview scans a database, you can add a regular expression for the column name. But in our case, it's just the data pattern. And that is the classification plus the classification rules. And within the scan rule sets, those are combined. So you select from the system classification rules, and you select your custom ones. And you can define custom scan rule sets for every source type. Plus, you can even specify multiple scan rule sets for that example for the data lake. And now let's have a look at the content. We already had a look at the data map. The data map, it's just the data sources. It doesn't contain the assets. The assets, those are the really interesting things, because the assets, if we browse the assets, we can have a look at assets in a data factory, assets in a SQL server, assets in a data lake. That is, well, it's a way of looking at your data catalog, but you have to know where to look. And you have to know that, I know that my customer data is stored in an Azure SQL database. And now you have to know that your customer data is stored in the demos database at a certain SQL instance. So that is not the right approach of having a catalog and a search index. So getting back to the start screen, we've got the search box in here. And that is really the key, because we can search, for example, customer. And what we get back, well, it's a search engine. It's the data catalog that is searched, and we get back all those entries that contains the information of customer somewhere. We have a table in an Azure SQL database. We've got a customer comments Power BI data flow in a Power BI workspace. We've got an Azure Data Factory copy activity. We've got a file that is called dim customer in a data lake. We've got SQL tables, we've got views, and so on. So we've got a pipeline over there. 21 results. But we are looking for customer data that contains email addresses. And what we can use is that kind of filter pane over here, where we can limit the result list to only those entries that contain email addresses. And how is that one applied? Those are the classifications. Let's have a look at the customers table over here. And that is the assets overview page. What you see here, it's the technical information, the properties, the database server, the creation date, and so on, the object type, the U from the SQL database, the user table, and so on. And you see the hierarchy. That customer table is part of the DBO schema, it's part of the demos database, it's part of that specific Azure SQL server. And there are classifications. There are classifications applied on different levels. There are schema classifications, and that schema can be browsed in here using the schema tab over there. And we get the list of columns. That is the technical inventory process. Azure Purview scans your data source. Azure Purview scans your SQL database, and Azure Purview gets the schema. Plus, it applies the classification rules and finds some sort of information. That column email address, it contains email address data. That first name and last name and middle name columns, they contain person's name information. Phone numbers are found in the phone column. So that is the part where the automatic classification kicks in. What is also good to know, it's the list of contacts. In many bigger companies, if the companies are small, it's that way. If the companies are small, you know who is responsible for your system. But if it's a bigger company, yeah, sometimes you know that there is a system, but you really don't know who is responsible. And Azure Purview allows you to add some experts and or owners, system owners to your environment. And you can add some sort of additional information, like I'm the technical expert and my colleague, he's the content expert. So people and users of the data catalog can now directly contact the responsible person. What is really nice, but sometimes a little bit limited, is the automated classification. And sometimes you need to manually edit that information. So you can switch to the edit mode and you can add some more classification, or you can remove that person's name classification from the middle name. So we can just remove that one and maybe add it to person's name to the salesperson information. And we can save that one. So that is one part. We can start with the automatic classification coming from the scanners, or from the system-defined classification rules, from your custom-defined classification rules. And you can edit and add some information in there. And that can all be used for filtering down the information. Like, we are not looking for customer data including an email address, but customer data having the DBCC Kunde flag. So we see we've got data in a database. We've got database or a few in another database. And we've got one file in a data lake. So let's have a look at that file over there. And we've got the schema classification applied. Let's have a look at the technical properties. So that is really the part where the technical nerds can have a look what is in the background over there. And we've got a different schema within that file. It's not a customer name column. It's not a Kundennummer column. It's Kennung. But the content, well, triggered the classification of DBCC Kunde. Contexts, we haven't applied contexts, but we can have a look at the hierarchy that is applied. So we can everything browse in the data catalog, because in the background it's stored in a network. In the background it's nodes and edges. So we have a node of the storage account. We have an edge that leads to the storage generation 2. We've got a file system that is applied over there, and we've got files in there. And it's the same if we go to the database over here to the customers table, and we've got the schema and so on. So we've got everything related. So what is missing here is the data lineage, because we want to know where comes my data and where goes my data. So we started with the DBCC Kunde classification in the customer table in the AdventureWorks database. And if we switch to the lineage information, we've got that data asset, that table, and there is a connection. And that connection, well, data flows through two data factory copy activities. There's a copy customer SQL to SQL, and there's a copy data one activity. I should have named them that one a little bit better. And that one flows into another database on the same server, which is called demos, in the customers table over there. And we can also have a look what are the columns that are read and written to the other side. So we can have a look at the data flow at the column level on that part. And that is the data lineage. And the data lineage, well, wasn't brought in by myself. It was introduced by the registering of the data sources, the databases, plus, here we go, by registering an Azure Data Factory. And every pipeline run within the Wolfgang ADF 01 Data Factory puts the execution information into Azure Purview. And that data lineage is read, and that data lineage, well, is pushed into the Purview catalog. And we can have a look at that one. We can have a look at that pipeline activity, and let's see what are all those artifacts that are connected. Oh my God, there is zip code information stored in the data lake, transferred using the copy PLZ, the copy zip code activity, into a destination file in the data lake. And there are 3 copy activities that are fetching the data from the file and store them into the database over there. So very, very detailed information as a start, I would say, because Azure Data Factory, it's supported, but it only supports the copy data activity. No additional activities are supported. Purview, well, they claim to support integration services data lineage, but what they really get out of integration services runs is simple or simplest data flows, reading a source and writing to a destination. And I'm not sure if they even support some transformations in there. So data lineage, it's getting better. It's getting better with every revision, but it can be enhanced. And that enhancement leads me to the next part, which is the Apache Atlas API. The Apache Atlas API, it's a huge and well-defined API to discover all the information, to work with the entities in your data catalog. And it's not the read only, it's also a write possibility using that API. So that is the thing where maybe that missing part of the data lineage can be put into your Purview data catalog using the Apache Atlas API. There are entities, plus there are some relationship information where we can add, where we can post some more information about the data lineage, for example. And that is one of the things where you can use the Apache Atlas API to enrich your data catalog. And as I talk about enrichment, there's one thing I haven't talked about. It's the business glossary. And the business glossary, it's the more, not the technical view at your data estate, it's the business related view. And that business glossary allows you to create a glossary of business terms. In my case, I've already defined some sort of hierarchy, like I've got the term of a business partner, I've got the term of a customer, I've got a supplier, and I've got the business glossary term of preferred supplier. And everything in there, well, I translated it to German, like the Geschäftspartner, the Kunde is the customer, Lieferant, supplier, and so on. In that business glossary, let's go to the business partner over here and edit that one. We can add or define the hierarchy. Business partner is the parent or the start of our hierarchy, so no parent is involved. And we can add some synonyms like business partner and the German Geschäftspartner, it's the same. We can also find and define some related terms in here, and that is the definition. Well, it's the dictionary we are defining. And business glossary terms can be applied onto assets. And let's go over to the customer asset over there. And there are also or already two glossary terms applied. In the customer table, we've got customer data stored, which is indicated by the DBCC Kunde classification. And in addition, we switch to the edit mode and we can add some glossary terms. And we can even go to that one. So it's a more generic business partner glossary term. Save that one. And now start again for customer. And what we see is, I haven't talked about that one. There is even a filter option for the glossary terms. So we can limit all our 21, 22 assets that are returned and only select those ones that are customers. Let's go over here. Let's go over there. And we've got only those that are or do have those business glossary terms applied. So that is another thing where you can define, where you can apply an index, where you can define and apply your glossary terms to your data assets. What's missing? It's the insights part. Reporting about your data lake, reporting about your data estate, reporting about what is in there, and reporting about your scan history and so on. That is the plan, let's call it that way. And Purview is, as I said, in preview, and that insights part, well, could take some more work, to be honest, because it's not that kind of powerful or not that kind of insights I provided. I would really like to see in that kind, because we've got, well, a tree map over here for 284 assets in Power BI and so on, SQL Server. But those are not interactive. It's just the tooltip that is there. If we go to the view more, okay, we've got it in a table. I'm not able to export that one. I'm not able to work with that one. So the assets part, yeah, it's here and it would need some more detailed information. What I would really like to see in the future is maybe an option of connecting Power BI to that insights database or model and build my own Power BI reports based on that. So the insights part, well, could take some more work, to be honest. As I talked about Power BI, oh my God, I forgot something. Let's go over here. Let's go over to the Power BI environment. You can map or configure Power BI as a data source. And within the next scan, workspaces are listed. The content of the workspaces are listed. And let's go over here and have a look what's in there. And Purview lists Power BI datasets, Power BI reports, and even Power BI data flows, if there are some. And if we go to the Purview demo report, it's the same structure we know. What we can do is there's the blue button, open that one in Power BI. So if we go over here, that report is opened here, but there is lineage involved. And there is lineage involved from the report back to the data set, back to the data source. And for those of you that have seen the lineage view in Power BI, well, there's some information missing, and there is some sort of graphical information missing. So I hope and really hope that some pieces of the Power BI lineage information and lineage view, well, will move into Purview. That would be really, really nice to have some sort of more lineage view. But even Power BI is integrated in Purview to get your data lineage in here. And integration, the last part of today, I talked about the data integration and the integration of Purview into other systems. And what I've got here, let's look for the Synapse, that one and that one. So I'm gonna start my Synapse Studio. Yes, we are here. The Synapse environment, what you can do is you can map and link your Synapse environment to a Purview account. And I've already done that one. And if you go over here, there's a search box over here. And you can search within the Purview data catalog or in your Synapse workspace. And if we search within the Purview catalog, just hit enter, we get the list of assets from the data catalog. And we go over here and the menu changes a little bit. Edit and refresh, those are the things we know out of Purview. But now we've got a connect and a develop approach. So we can directly start within the detail page of a Purview asset information. In that case, it's the customer table. And we can start creating a data flow. We can start creating a new integration data set or a linked service. And we can even go to the CSV file over here. And we can connect to that one. And we can start the data exploration directly out of the Purview integration. Let's do a select over here. And that doesn't look good. My SQL serverless pool doesn't like me. Well, it likes me. And here's the integration of having the data catalog, scanning our data lake, filling the data catalog, search the data catalog within or out of your Synapse environment, listing all the results, getting to the detail page, and starting the data exploration out of that result information. And it's the same approach with the Azure Data Factory. If we go over here, it's an option to map your Purview account to your data factory. And the same goes over here. If we go to the author, we can start the search of our data catalog. Go over here, select one, that pipeline. Okay, pipeline is not that right. The best example I could choose. Oh my God. Let's take the file again, and we can create a new data set, a new data flow, or a linked service to that part of our data lake. So direct integration between your data catalog and Synapse Analytics and the Azure Data Factory. And with that, I'm nearing the end of my session. And to wrap it up, what we've heard in the last hour, it was the story about the data catalog, the data governance service, the new one from Microsoft, Azure Purview, which allows us to define connections to data sources, which allows us to create scan definitions where we can define what should be scanned, an example for the data lake, which file types should be scanned, and how the data in those data assets should be processed. And processed means to classify the data that is stored there. And with that scan rule set, that is the combination of that configuration, well, the output is a list of data assets, tables, files, whatever, Power BI, reports, data sets, plus the connection between those assets. It's the data lineage. How is the data transferred? Is there a data factory pipeline that is doing the work? And is there a relationship somewhere? And that is the part of the data catalog. The data catalog can be searched. That data catalog can be filtered using the system or the custom applied classifications, plus in a more business-friendly way, using filters of the business glossary terms. And last but not least, Azure Purview, it's not the standalone tool, it's integrated and can be integrated into Synapse Analytics and as of today into Azure Data Factory. And with that, I'm at the end and I'm looking forward to your questions. And if you have some questions tomorrow, next month, next year, my contact details are here. I'm happy that I can answer your questions afterwards.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Wolfgang. Yes, so we've got some questions. I think we've got 9 questions to go through. Hopefully Mikhail won't mind me being cheeky and do a double-pronged question at the beginning. So the first question is, if I already have an Azure data catalog deployed in my organization, is there an upgrade path to Purview? And my sneaky question that I just want to add in there is that there is an elephant in the room that needs to be discussed, and that's one of cost. Whereas Azure data catalog could be incredibly cheap, I think it's almost free, in fact, for very low-level use. Is there anything equivalent in Purview?
Okay, I have to answer that one, or and I've the TV chef would say I've prepared something, and I've really prepared something for the pricing because that's a question that really pops up. But for the upgrade path from the Azure Data Catalog version 1 into Purview, I'm not aware of an upgrade path as of today. But I'm not sure, and I hope that there will be an upgrade path, but I have to look it up and maybe put the answer into the comments below the video if it's posted, because I don't know the answer. So I'm not aware of an upgrade path as of today. And for the pricing, yeah, those are 2 completely different stories, Azure Data Catalog version 1 and Purview. Purview pricing is based on 2 different bills. The first bill, that one, let's put it here. The first bill, it's that one, it's for the data map. And as I said, we can choose between a size of 4 capacity units or 16 capacity units. And those capacity units, those are the, well, some sort of pricey if we sum it up. If we are just doing the math, for, let's say, about roughly 30 cents per hour per capacity unit. So what we've got is 30 cents multiplies with 4, because we have at minimum 4 capacity units. It's 24 hours. And where is it? If we put put that one with 30 days or 31 or 29, it doesn't really matter. It's roughly 800 euros per month. That is just the data map. Because it's just the unified platform that is that part. In addition, we need to consider the costs for the scanning. During the preview, Power BI and SQL Server on premises scanning is free, but every other data source, well, it costs per vCore hour. So the bigger the data source, the bigger the data lake, the bigger the database, the more tables, the more data is in there, the more the scan costs. So minimum price 860 euros, I think, per month, plus scanning costs. That is the information as of today. That is the information during the preview. And the preview itself, it was free. In the beginning, Microsoft said, hey, Purview is free. And we were happy until we saw the first bill, because it was free for certain Azure subscription types. So that was some sort of, I spent some 100 euros on having a demo instance running. And then they extended to February, end of February, and then they extended to the end of May. And since the beginning of June, Purview, well, it's about the 800 euros per month for the data map. Let's see when Purview gets GA. Let's see about the pricing for the GA. And let's see if, well, the pricing scheme skips or follows the pattern of the preview for the data map plus the scanning. But fingers crossed that there will be some change, and I hope that there will be some change to get it cheaper and not the other way around.
Perfect. So you showed a bunch of file types that you were scanning. And the question was, is it possible to scan other file types or password protected zip files, for instance?
For the password protected zip files, I'm not aware that there is an option, but other file types, no, yeah, it's somewhere here in the scan rule set. Let's create one. And what you can do is, no, let's take the second one, the best name, it's the test, yeah? And you can add a new file type. And that one is just another ending file extension, which has some sort of custom delimiter, or which is just another name or another extension for a system file type, like a JSON file, and that one is called, the extension is .conf, for example. For the, as I said, for the password protected zip files, I'm not aware that there is an option to add the password somewhere in there.
So we've got a question from Finton, which I suspect could be a big rabbit hole to go down. So maybe an idea to keep the answer brief here. But he asks, can we scan data sources through a data gateway that live on or in another Azure tenant or cloud provider such as AWS?
AWS, it's not a problem because there is a connector for AWS. And the S3, it's in here, and that one is no problem. And for the gateway, there is the option of adding and configuring integration runtimes. So same approach, Azure Data Factory, Azure Purview. Integration runtime, it's the service to connect to your on-premises data sources or to sources that are living somewhere. So with that, it's possible. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
So we saw that we could override an automatic classification, but when I override, for instance, you show the person name. When I override this, will there ever be another classification that will override this rule and get the person name back? Or can you define priority on scan rules if they are conflicting? So you will get multiple or no changes of your classifications.
Yeah. Perfect spot. And you really got that thing spot on, because Automatic classification applies the initial classification. If you open the edit mode, there is that light blue thing that currently says making a manual update to the asset will prevent future scans on this asset from updating it. As of today, in that preview version, if you edit an asset and put some sort of new glossary term in there or schema definition, as I did with that one here, no future automatic classification run overrides that one, which is not the best case. And also the idea of having some sort of importance rules and priority, it's a very, very good idea, but it's not in there today. So every manual edit, Purview team says, sorry, it's your entity now, and we are not updating it in the future. And I hope
this
that
is valid. This is valid for all the columns in this table entity.
Yes.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay, so we've got a bit of a cheeky question here. If you configured two different data sources, which were actually the same, but configured using a different DNS host record, would Purview be clever enough to realize that they were the same? So for instance, SQL Server has an internal server name, so would Purview use that to know that they were the same thing?
Good question. I haven't tested that one, and I would almost bet that no. So yeah, from my experience with the SQL classification, as you mentioned, SQL Server, for example, there is the asset type of views that came into it. But what is still missing for the views is the lineage. So I wouldn't, to be honest, really assume that we get that kind of, hey, that is the same server in the background approach. So let's stick to a no.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Can the search inside Purview find, for instance, a customer from only the classification? So when we have classification that this is a customer name, not from, well, let's say, can it find the person name from the classification only? So we search for the class that was defined.
The real classification, so that it was the person's name.
Yes.
Yeah. So what we can do, we can search for that one, but the search itself, it's more, let's say, an agile search, because it searches for part of that search string. Let's put it under, no, if I combine it, it doesn't find it. But what it does, maybe.
So we already have a filter on something, and we can add more filters on the person's name.
We can add some more filters to only the classification of person's name. So all those entities, all those assets have the person's name classification applies. So here it is.
But we can't use a wildcard search for everything that is classified as person's name, regardless of.
Maybe there is, but maybe there is some sort of, I don't know, classification, person's name. That is just a guess. No, doesn't help. So I'm gonna look that up. Maybe I find something and I put it out on Twitter if there's a way.
Perfect. Thanks.
So because we're connecting to lots of different data sources, the question is Key Vault integration heavily supported in Purview?
Yes, heavily and deeply integrated, because every scan, so, oh my God, here we are. If we go over here and let's have a look at that one, edit the scan, the credentials, those are all put into the Key Vault over there. So we've got, sorry, where are we? Where is the access control? No, the credentials, they are here. It's everything in, you've got a linked service to a Key Vault, and all those credentials are stored in the key vault, and you configure the scan, because the scan is actually the process that connects to your data source, and that scan uses the credentials stored in the key vault. So it's very well integrated.
Good. The one who listened really closely heard you talk about nodes and edges when connecting the parts of the map.
Yeah.
Do we know if there is maybe a Cosmos DB graph database in the background, or is there another graph data source that was selected for this?
As far as I know, it's another one, and it's based on the Apache Atlas system. But I don't really know what is actually powering the Purview in the background. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Right, so we're moving on to the final question. Hopefully it'll be a good one. How would you implement automation in Purview? So let's say, for instance, that you want to have alerting on something being discovered. Are there objects like triggers supported, or would you have to use external calling services such as Logic, apps, functions, or even ADF querying through Purview?
Yeah, I'm hoping to get that one. Yeah, currently there is nothing implemented in the automation and some triggers events. So it's, well, your part to have a look at the data catalog. But I really, really, really hope that there will be something that we get some sort of, hey, there's a new asset found. But what can be automated using the Apache Atlas plus, or more specific, the Purview API, you can trigger scans from the outside. So if you have, for example, a metadata-driven data warehouse or something like this, if there's an update in the structure, you could trigger a Purview scan that the new structure is put into your data catalog. So that is possible today.
Wonderful. And that would conclude the question session for today. Thanks everybody for joining, and a big thanks to Wolfgang.
Thanks for having me, and I hope you learned something how to govern your data.